Um, we are looking at the women who are mentioned in the genealogies of Jesus, specifically in Matthew chapter 1. Ah, I don't know what that was all about. And so now we come to a woman who's not even mentioned by name. And I thought we would look at that immediately at that tab pulled up here. So I'm going to leave this tab and go to this tab and go to the Matthew interlinear. All right, so this is Matthew chapter 1. You can see book is called Biblos. That's where we get the word Bible. And the genealogy looks like the word Genesis. So when we talk about people being begotten, if someone begat, someone gave birth to, that's the word genosis or geneseos. And you can see Jesus Christ's name there, Jesus Christu, which sounds very Hispanic to me. Jesus Christu. No J. It's aspirated capital iota Y. So it's Yesu. Keep Christ in Christmas. That's what Xmas really is. Some people are offended when they see Xmas, but it's really key. It's the first letter of Christ's name, so they're just saying Christmas, but some people find that to be sacrilegious. They're not Xing Jesus out, they're just using the letter of his first name. So he's the Leos of David, son of Abraham. I'm using Hebrew phonetic spellings again in the Greek. That's not right. Well, then we move down and we see some of these names that we've already looked at. Let's see that first lady that we see. Oh, there's Judah. So we've got to find Tamar. There she is. That's Theta. So the Greeks had the th sound. A lot of languages don't have that sound. So it's really Thamar, as the Greeks would pronounce it. The Hebrews don't have th. So when you say Bethlehem, they would not say th. It's bet. So it's a hard T. My Dutch parents also, there's no th in Dutch either, so it takes a while for them to learn that. But Americans can't roll their R's, which is pretty heavily used in a lot of languages. And I was just listening to some people speak Dutch on the internet the other day, and I was just listening just to the phonetic sounds. And the Dutch people do a lot of so anyway, and then we have Perez, and we know Perez is the one who is the ancestor for Jesus, and that's with a phi there. So that was actually the Greeks would pronounce that Phares. And then we move down. Oh, this is another interesting thing to me. Why are they calling him Ram when there's definitely an alpha at the beginning of that name? And that typically happens in a lot of the phonetic renderings of these names in the Greek and the Hebrew. They just get spelled differently in the English. So, I mean, the English phonetic spelling of that is Aram, but for some reason our Bible just wants to call him Ram. Maybe he's from Los Angeles, who went to St. Louis, then came back to Los Angeles. And then we have Salmon begot Boaz. Oh, and there's Rahab. And there's the key in the middle of her name. So it's Rechab. Rechab. That's how the Greeks would say her name. And then we get to Ruth. And that is a capital Rho. Where did I see her name?
Up top.
There it is. That letter looks like a P to us is a capital R in the Greek. And that is Ruth. That's a good rendering. But now we come to Jesse, David, we're getting to the last woman's name apart from Mary. And that is David then begat Solomona and there's no word for wife there. Wife is gunikos, something that sounds like gynecology. That's what a wife is. But the definite article is a feminine. So it's just telling you that's the wife. And her name isn't named. It just says, out of the wife of Uriah. So this is a real interesting, why isn't her name there? Why is she known by her husband? And Uriah who? Now, when you look at the key players of the story of David and Bathsheba and Uriah, all those are very Hebrew names. And we've been going down a trail of women who are emphatically not Hebrew. So then we run into Bathsheba. Her name is Hebrew. Bat, daughter. Sheva, oath, or even covenant. She's the daughter of the covenant or the daughter of an oath. No one really today would name their daughter Bathsheba, I don't think. Do you think we'd ever run into a lady named Bathsheba? She actually ends up being kind of an honorable person. And a lot of what transpires...
Jezebels, right?
Yeah, there are Jezebels today. People name their daughters Jezebel.
Somebody did it.
Someone has.
Somebody said, I need a Bible name.
Oh, they wouldn't have done.
Okay.
Yeah. Without knowing who Jezebel was.
Somebody did it.
It's
a big world.
I know that Orpah or Oprah Winfrey mispronounced name of
So
Orpah.
what they wouldn't name her, you're saying they wouldn't name that just because of her Bathsheba, because of the story. That's what
I'm not saying anything. No, I'm not saying that. Did I say that?
I thought
I
you
just-
said you wouldn't find.
I'm using this word interesting. I've used it too much last Sunday for things I don't know. I don't know why her name is not listed. I don't know why the husband's name is listed.
At least the poor guy, at least, he got a mention.
Yes,
Because
he got treated rudely.
pretty rudely.
Yes.
So
But back to a stream of thought, I've got Gentile, and then I get to Bathsheba, and depending on what you're trying to push, that's what she is. So, man, there's so much junk about these two. So if you look at her family tree, she's the daughter of Eliam, who is the daughter of Ahithophel. Ahithophel is an advisor to King David. Ahithophel changed sides when Absalom wanted to take the throne. So he was a famous, they say of him, his advice was like hearing the advice of God. And so David trusted and leaned on him, but then he switched over and supported Absalom for a coup against David. And a lot of people suspect that's because of his relationship with Bathsheba, his granddaughter. No verse says that, but it's like, why would one of David's most faithful men turn on him and support a guy who's trying to oust him from the throne? This is so much drama going on. It's ridiculous.
So you're saying Bathsheba's
Grandfather, Ahithophel. Now, he says he's from Gilon. What they call him the Gilonite. And I thought, oh, well, there he is. He's not a Hebrew. He's a Gilonite. And you look online and no one tells you anything about a civilization of the Gilonites. He's just a guy from a town called Gilon, and it was in the Judean wilderness. And when Joshua took over the land, obviously everyone who lived in the land For example, we'll stop for a moment and talk about Uriah the Hittite. The Hittites were supposed to have been destroyed. They're among the Canaanite clans. But here you got a guy, one of the best fighters for David, who has a Jewish name, but is known as Uriah the Hittite. He's fighting for King David, killing the Amorites. So obviously, when David took over Jebus, the Jebusite city, and then later called it Jerusalem, a lot of people who were spared and not murdered off just became Jewish, just started living Jewish because that's what the king was. And so many Hittites just bought into the society. Now they were going to be with this king. They were just ruled by different kings anyway. You had to do what the king was. And if you didn't want to live and run away, run to Egypt or go somewhere else, you just became what the people were. So now there are some people there that want Bathsheba to be black, want her to be from Africa. I'm not sure what's driving that narrative. I think it'd be cool, interesting, but interesting. But you just look at what's said out there, and you go to the Bible, and you just don't get clear indications that Bathsheba was a foreigner. She's most likely Jewish. It sounds like she maybe possibly married a foreigner, but her herself, she could be. I'm not going to stake my theology on her being a foreigner, which kind of ruins my little series here, of all the women, because I literally thought she was not an Israelite because she married a Hittite, but I can't find overwhelming evidence to say that's what she is. I can show you a verse where she said her name isn't mentioned. So this is where I'm probably going, is that they mentioned the guy who's known as a Hittite, and of course we know that David and Bathsheba is a black eye on the history of David. In fact, in Kings, where there's a review of David's life, they talk about some of David's descendants, and they said he did evil like his father. He didn't live like King David, who did everything right in the eyes of the Lord, except for that time with Bathsheba. That's basically what it says. So,
And specifically, it was that the great sin was having Uriah killed. That's why people care that much, right? Because the king.
Okay, so this is where you get an interesting territory. This is where you get into territory where people speculate beyond. I mean, I have a Sunday school kids education about David and Bathsheba. I know it was King David. Well, let's go to something that's interesting. Intriguing. I need to get my thesaurus out. Man, oh man. I listened to my sermon the other day, and I just said, how many times can you use the word interesting? You got to knock it off. And now I am plagued. Let's see. Here we're going to go. Let's look at the city of David. People don't often recognize that you see this outline here? That this is the original city of David, the Jebusite city that he took over. And that it had this construction. And here's the Kidron Valley. And over here, but then I saw a picture that put the Kidron, where's the valley? Gehenna, the Hinnom Valley, they had way down here. But this is the Tyropian Valley, the Kidron Valley. Over here is the Garden of Gethsemane, the Mount of Olives. This is a steep cliff. It's a very easily to defend city. You put some walls, because there's a valley here and a valley here, you're elevated. You put some walls around it. And of course, the Jebusites had walls. They laughed at David when they thought he was going to get it past their walls. There's mountains surrounding Jerusalem. It's not the highest spot, but in this little mound of dirt is a well, a perpetual running well, and that's where you build a city, where you've got constant water, you got a city. So when David fought this over, he eventually builds a palace somewhere around here. up here on the tippity topmost point, which is known as Mount Moriah, which historians, of course, this is debated, but I kind of throw in with it. This became the Temple Mount. All of this was built by Herod, this big structure. I don't know how many acres that is. The other day I said that Jericho was about 2 acres. It's probably more like 4. It's probably about as big as our campus. That's probably about 4 acres too. To build a foundation 4 acres big at that time is something. Okay, so he would have had a palace here, and if you will note the topography, everything descends below the palace. So we know that he goes out in the middle of the night or at some part of the night, and he looks and he sees someone on their roof or outside. He's got a bird's eye view of the entire city from where he is. So I don't know how far he spied down, but he saw someone that caught his attention. There is a Jewish legend from the Midrash, which are commentaries on the Bible. They say David, it was as we read the passage, he was aroused at night by something. Something got his attention. And they said the devil sent a bird to bother him. And so he got out his bow and arrow. And I didn't know that he had a bow and arrow. And he shot the bird, but he missed. And it hit the screen that Bathsheba was bathing behind. And whoa, did he get something there? And so they attribute it to the devil. Now, other people say, did you know that when men went off to battle, they told their wives that they were ceremonially divorced so that if they died in battle, there would be some legal execution of something that would help them? This was found in a couple different places that I read. So, technically David and Bathsheba didn't commit adultery because her husband was off to war and she would have received that certificate of divorce that would free her. But I'm just like, so people have written a lot of things. But depending on who you're rooting for, either David raped her or she seduced him. I mean, people have all kinds of perspectives to defend for whatever reason. I actually read a little bit of that God Questions, and it just said something very profound. Read what you see in the Bible and don't go beyond what you see in the Bible. People love to go beyond that. And we tend to want to do that because, there's archaeology and there's things that inform us about things that we do not read that actually help supplement what we read sometimes. But, whether you want Bathsheba to be of a different ethnic origin or if you want to put all the blame on David, I'm ready to put all the blame on David. We'll talk about that in a moment. And if you continue to read the story, you find out that Bathsheba actually is very good at politics. And she gets her way about a lot of things. And she actually disciplines her son Solomon for all of his marriages and for his behavior. So there's a spiral that comes out of this unfortunate meeting that really, children are dying, people are dying. Solomon is not, who is probably the highlight of what it means to be a king for the Jewish people. I've told you that story, right? I was at the water park in Southern California, and a bunch of youth from a Jewish youth group were there. And you could tell that they were Jewish because all the young boys had kippahs on their head. And so I asked this one girl, I said, can you tell me who the greatest king of Israel was? And I was hoping to hear her say David. And she says, no, Solomon. Solomon was the greatest of all our kings. And there's so much theology that we have incorporated with David. But she determined that the king who ruled the most, had the most, smartest, that was the greatest king. So anyway, back to the topography here. They really believe that his palace was somewhere around here. And then this would have been the threshing floor that he bought for the construction of the temple. Remember that there was David took a census of the people, and God said, "No, you sinned. I've got 3 choices for you, something that will last 3 years, 3 months, 3 days, something like that." And he says, "No, let's get it over quick. Let's do the short option." And a plague or something goes through the town and people are dying in the streets. It's like those Chinese videos of COVID. People are just dropping down, and then David cries out to the Lord and says, "We got to stop this. This was my fault. Why are you taking it out on the people?" And then the plague stops right here, according to the story. And so he wants to purchase that land. And then the guy who owns it says to David, "You can have it." And David says, "No, I will not purchase something.
It's not a second.
Yeah, that
Not a
won't
sacrifice.
cost me."
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's going to give it to the Lord.
Is that Ornin's threshing floor?
Who's?
Ornin?
Maybe. I'm sorry. I said I only have a Sunday school one on this one. But if you know something, you can look it up on your computer or on your phone.
You can use your peripheral brain.
Okay. So, well, you know what? It was probably pretty meager and just the top of the mountain. Of course, you know, Mount Moriah is where Abraham offered Isaac up as a sacrifice and was stopped from doing so. So this becomes a very connected storyline. Isaac and Abraham offering Isaac is very shadowy and typologically the Lord offering his son Christ as a sacrifice. And of course, that's the first use of the word worship in the Bible. Abraham says, "We're going to go up to these mountains and worship." Okay, so we see this because of Herod the Great. This is the Wailing Wall right here. This is a giant reading room. This is the funnest place to go in because there's ladies can't go in. I'm sorry. But the men can go in here, and there's all these rabbis in there, and there's books. It's like a giant library, and they're all reading out loud, and the room is just buzzing. And it's just amazing. And then you go over here, and there's the museum where they show you what Herod's Jerusalem would have looked like, and you can walk all the way along this wall right here. And then you get to this point, and you're as close as you can get to the Holy of Holies. You got a sign there. Okay, here's some more pictures there. This is what Jerusalem looks like today. This is typically how people look at old Jerusalem today. 4 quarters. But it doesn't have the ancient city of David isn't even thought of in ancient Jerusalem today. And I don't know why. I don't know. This is mostly considered just a Palestinian town today. But really, David's palace, what's that say right there? David's palace is outside of the walls of what's considered ancient Jerusalem today. So things change over time. Going into the Christian quarter is like going into a high-end mall. We're losing malls. People don't go to malls anymore, but I remember walking in there and feeling like I was in a very beautiful mall. You go to the Muslim quarter, and that's just gritty street vendors. It's dark. It's foreboding. People are friendly, but it's not swept clean and everything looking. This was all expensive stuff. This was where you barter and haggle for things. And the Orthodox part and the Jewish part were pretty nice, but you just knew you were somewhere different when you went to the Christian quarter because it was like made for commerce, and it's like, welcome, come to this shop. It's clean and nice and safe. All right. Of course, that was 20 years ago, More than that, almost 27 years ago, I was in Jerusalem. That's too long. We need to
When
get
you
a
go
trip.
again.
We have to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
That's it.
excuse me. Thank you. I just need a few more people to do it. I can organize it. So, Kidron Valley, this artwork is overdoing it. It makes it look like the city of David was a couple of giant apartment complexes. I think it was just a bunch of smaller huts and two-story, and people did go escape to their roofs to cool off at night. It's hot there. It's interesting to me that whatever bathing was going on, it wasn't going to be a heavy tub on top of a roof. So it was either going to be bucket pouring but even that, being on a roof to bathe, this seems interesting to me. But it would have been cool. You would have got a fresh wind. Not certain what month this takes place. It snows in Jerusalem on occasion. So it's definitely not in the wintertime. Well, it tells us when it was. It was when the kings were supposed to go to war. That sounds like a springtime activity. So whatever this artwork represents here, that's too much. Thinner walls. You have the pool of Siloam down here. That's where the spring enters out from Hezekiah's tunnel. I don't know, someone just got really creative there with their, what's that game the kids make all cities and communities with? What's that game? Minecraft or Loki Craft. All right. So I don't know. This is still ancient stuff. Maybe Herod made, but today nothing like this exists. It just looks like a shanty town. From where you see the Ophel would be the space between the Temple Mount and maybe the palace. Hey, look at there. They think that's where the palace was. Well, someone does because they're doing some excavations here. Let me show you. This is from far away. Sorry, I'm trying to be good with this cursor. So here's the bottom of the city of David. So you can see it's just all up. And if there was a palace here, you could look down and see the whole city. This is Christian Life Ministries website. I don't know who they are. Anyways, they go underneath the streets to find stuff, and they think this is David's palace that they're excavating presently. That's what they think. Ooh, that's a nice fireplace. I want one like that. That's got to be a fireplace. I don't know. But one thing you can see, if you can see, that's community down below. You see that? The lighting is so bright. The contrast is a little too harsh. But that's just a bunch of shanties down below. And David could have spied that all out. There's a better view of it. That to me looks like on the other side of the Kidron Valley, though. So the stuff he would be seeing down would be down over here. But that's the kind of houses I'm thinking people are living in, not those big, giant municipal buildings. See, that's a steep grade. That's looking down into the valley of Kidron. That is steep. The city of David goes off this way. But yeah, I'm all game to go again. This would have been a support structure to keep a building in place against the wall, like a retaining wall. They call it the mole or something. All right. Somewhere we can go back. Let's go to our 2 Samuel reading that gets us to talk about this. I was going to say fateful night. I don't know why I say that because I don't believe in fate. I know it's part of our idiomatic phrases. But again, I was reading some Jewish literature, and they believe that Bathsheba was supposed to be David's wife, but not this way. And they have a word for predestination, that this was determined on the 6th day of creation, that David and Bathsheba were supposed to be married, but he jumped the gun and took her too soon.
Who said this?
Jewish commentators. Again, people come to this story with a lot of different agendas. This is a bad, bad incident in what transpires here. Very bad. And, but David's a hero, and David is a template for the Messiah. And so they have a theology that says, well, this was, how else do you get Solomon if these two don't get together? So Solomon was supposed to happen, but it happened the wrong way. So they do believe in some form of predestination. It just interesting. This is, I used that word again. It's just the way things are working out. All right. So this version is called the easy to read version.
I like it. I like that name.
Oh, you like that name? I don't know who they are again. And easy to read version means, I don't know what it means. Easy to read version means it's going to be longer to smooth out the things that the Bible just assumes you're going to understand. In the spring, like we thought, when kings go out to war, and whenever I've heard a sermon on David and Bathsheba, that line is the key line. You guys heard this all before? You guys want to
David
go
should
with
have
this?
been at the palace.
He shouldn't have been there. He should have been out fighting like a good king. But he had Joab. He had fighters like Uriah. It was going to be a cakewalk to do what they had to do on this, expedition. And he lounges at home, and that's how he gets in trouble. I have a friend, maybe I shouldn't bring this up, who, gifted, talented, everything. And when he got fixed on a task, you wouldn't want anyone else but this guy. But when he got lazy, he got into trouble. So maybe that's where the Protestant work ethic comes in too. If you're always keeping busy, you sort of keep yourself from
Run out of steam.
lazy
Get in
sins.
trouble.
Yeah.
Idle hands or the devil.
Yes, very good.
Idle mind is a devil's workshop.
Workshop.
Yeah. So David sent Joab, his officers, and the Israelites out to destroy the Ammonites. Joab's army surrounded their capital city, Rabbah. David stayed in Jerusalem. One evening, so he's hanging out. What do you do if you're king? One evening he got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of his house. From there he saw a woman bathing. She was very beautiful. And I wonder from that distance, I don't know. A guy's imagination is a very fruitful place. But what he saw was beautiful. I don't know how you could tell really from that distance, but something was going on inside of him. So David sent for his officers and asked them who she was. An officer answered, "That is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam. She is the wife of Uriah the Hittite." So why he goes by the name Hittite when he actually has a Hebrew name? His wife has a Hebrew name. That's his family tree. They weren't originally a part of the invading troops with Joshua. They were locals who got subsumed into the Jewish culture, but he's still known as being a Hittite, a group of people that the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Ammonites, the Jebusites, there's 7 civilizations that God told Joshua, you're going to eliminate them. But here's a guy who's still around from one of the civilizations that were supposed to be eliminated. So Joshua evidently didn't do everything he was supposed to do, which doesn't sound comfortable because that's Jesus' name. But that's the story. David sent messengers to go and bring Bathsheba to him. What was he thinking? What was that all going to be about? So he's got plans. She had just purified herself after her monthly time of bleeding. Is that the very easy way to say it?
I don't know.
So she's finished her menstrual cycle, and perhaps that's why she's bathing. She's like, purified myself now. You're not allowed, according to the law of Moses, to lie with a woman when she's in that state. I don't know what this does to David. So she went to David. He had sexual relations with her, and she went back to her house. That just sounds like a one-night stand. I don't want to say what it sounds like. It's just, that's what it is. Not very noble. I'm sure it was all sexy. Later, Bathsheba became pregnant. She sent word to him saying, I am pregnant. Okay, well, then we know where the rest of the story goes. He gets in trouble, wants Uriah to come sleep with her. He won't do it. That's how faithful he is. So he sets it up so he gets killed in battle. Joab knows what's going on. Then he takes her to be his wife. The baby they have does not survive. Dies in its childhood. On the 7th day, 8th day, 7th. Before it was supposed to be circumcised, it died. Nathan, the prophet, comes to him, tells him the story about the poor man who just has one lamb and another guy who has 99. I found out in reading that this story also makes an appearance in the Quran, and that David and Bathsheba are referenced in the Quran, and the story is referenced, but different situation. It's two brothers, and one brother takes advantage of his poor brother. So it's theorized that Muhammad would have heard this early parable, because it's a parable, and he incorporated it in the Quran, or someone did. Someone who they call Muhammad.
It wasn't written until what, 900 some years after he died?
600? After he died?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, David says something very profound, like that guy needs to pay 4 times what he took, and then someone made the connection. Baby dies, Absalom dies, Tamar dies, and one other person died. Ahithophel, I think. Ahithophel, when he was trying to engage in the coup against King David with Absalom. Was Absalom the one with the long hair?
I think so.
Yeah. He gets caught in a tree. Absalom did not take Ahithophel's advice, and he was personally bothered by it. Went home. The Bible says he put everything in place, and then he hung himself. And some people have made the connection that Ahithophel and Judas are also typological of each other. When David writes that one of my closest friends has lifted his heel against me, people think he's referencing Ahithophel because he turned on him and signed up with his son to get rid of David. And then I thought I read that the advice that Absalom took, was from a guy who was like an implanted source from King David to give him bad advice. And the guy took the bad advice. Sort of like when the CIA shows up and says, let's go kidnap this governor. Yeah, let's do that. And it's mostly a CIA operation. And you find out that 13 of the people were connected to the FBI and CIA, and only 2 people were really thinking they were with a band of people. You guys know this stuff about Gretchen Whitmer and the kidnap of that Wisconsin governor?
Seems like I've heard that.
You guys have to know about this. They made this big stink about how Gretchen Whitmer was a kidnapping ploy. Well, come to find out that 90% of the people involved in it were secret agents trying to convince ne'er-do-wells to do it. And that's the advice Absalom took. And of course, I guess the rabbis would say, well, this on the sixth day, God made it happen that Absalom would listen to the wrong guy, because that bought David time, and he got fortified and he got ready for the battle. Anyway, we come back now to, what am I going to do with Bathsheba, who's not even mentioned by name, who's clearly a part of the genealogy of the line of David? You've got, maybe this is where I'm going to go. It's just coming to me right now as we're talking. Because David had a lot of wives. Remember the one, Abigail? David wanted to get frisky with her, and she's like, no, we're not doing that. This isn't right. And Bathsheba didn't protest like Abigail protested. David was he wrote a lot of beautiful songs, but he also had testosterone, I guess you call it. And in the wrong situations, he needed guidance. So where I was going with this is God has made a promise. We call it the Davidic covenant. What is the Davidic covenant?
That he would have someone on his throne.
That there would always be one of his sons on the throne forever, if they didn't blow it, if they didn't apostatize, I guess we would say, if they remained faithful. So I had this plan. You know, when guys, big time pastors, they do the sermon series, they go off for like 2 months and they get it all figured out. I'm just sort of like winging it. Yeah. So I wanted to associate a theological word with each of the women. And I did that on Sunday. So Tamar was the word inheritance. That's a huge theological term. It's related to our salvation. And then we got to Rechab, and I used the word adoption. She gets adopted into the family of God. And then we went to Ruth, obvious word. You just can't pass it up. Everyone knows Ruth is about redemption, being purchased and transferred to a new family. And then you get to Bathsheba, and you're like, what? Don't commit adultery. But if she didn't commit adultery, it's that silly thing again. If If Ruth hadn't been married by an Israelite, which was not supposed to happen, we wouldn't have got a descendant of David. And now we've got David doing something that he shouldn't have done, whom the rabbi said was going to happen, but he went out of time and did a sinful thing. But it was going to happen because he was going to have a son named Solomon, and he was going to produce David, the greatest king of all of Israel. United kingdom, everything shattered after him. But, and then we have got to get to the point where, is it Jeremiah or Ezekiel, that curses the line of David and says there will no longer be a king from your line? We have to look at that. We've talked about that before. You guys know about this? It's beautiful. Well, we'll talk about it when we get to Mary, because it's a major thing, because I got a story. I've already preached on this before, because it is a big thing. But so I'm looking for a theological word for Bathsheba. Now, just to kind of close the loop on Bathsheba, Absalom is declaring himself to be king, and she goes up to David and says, wait a minute, you promised me my son was going to be king. You promised me Solomon was going to be king. And he's getting old. He's getting really old now. And he's like, yeah, I'll do what I can do type thing. And then Nathan, the prophet, comes, and he brings help to Bathsheba and says, if you want Solomon the king, you better do these things right now and make David sign off on it. Because Absalom and all of his crew, they're already shouting the horns. They're sacrificing. He's riding into town on a donkey. He's doing all these things. And Bathsheba says, this is not supposed to happen. You've got to stop this. And that's when all of the drama takes place between Ahithophel and the other guy, Ushway. I forget his name. So, and like I said, when Solomon becomes king, she's involved in his life for a while, and she's giving him advice. And I was reading some Jewish literature about a lot of the proverbs applying, saying, undoubtedly, Bathsheba must have said this to Solomon, type thing, because there's a lot of things that he was supposed to learn as king, and he probably learned a lot from his mama. Okay, so I need a theological word for Bathsheba.
Covenant.
Covenant.
Yeah. You said her name was daughter of the covenant.
You were working on that?
Yeah, I was-
Oh my goodness, that's what her name means.
Yeah.
Where did this go?
Sherry had it too.
You did.
What?
What's her name mean, right? The meaning of the name?
Yeah, that is so good. You guys just inspired me, man. Yeah, because God said to David, you're always going to have one sitting on the throne. And Absalom was his son. Solomon was his son through an inappropriate relationship, and of course we know that the son that is related to Mary has not even been mentioned yet. But Mary gets connected to the line of King David through another son.
Now, I don't remember if it was you or if it was the guy I've been listening to.
Oh, yeah.
But there's one talking about the curse where the line was cut off.
Jehoiakim?
Wherever.
Yeah.
That's why it could not go through Joseph.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And that's why it had to go through Mary.
That's right.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's other reasons.
Well, and she was the person who contributed her egg,
Yeah.
who contributed her body and soul to Jesus.
But was not sinless.
But was not sinless. We do not believe she was. And we believe that later, her and Joseph had other children together. So she was not perpetually a virgin. So, all right.
Did Catholic believe that?
Catholics believe that she
Mary's
was immaculately conceived. She
Mary's
was
mother
conceived
was-
without sin somehow.
Mary's mother was sinless.
And that she has perpetually remained a virgin. And now she is the queen of heaven.
So what about the other brothers? How do they talk about,
They say that Mary married Joseph, an older man, and he had children from a previous.
Okay, so she was a
So they were cousins to Jesus. Is that right? Or
Half.
Well, no, they wouldn't be
siblings.
half brothers because Joseph isn't their papa.
Oh, it'd just be step.
Step.
Brothers.
Yeah. That's how the Roman Catholic tradition deals with that. All right. Any other insights about Bathsheba, David, covenants,
Well, I just kind of back to
lineage? If you learn something from those guys, you better tell me.
The thing I like about David is how, I mean, he will own his sin.
Yes.
When it's brought to him, he owns it.
And very reminiscent of Judah, his great-great-great-grandpappy, who when also was in a compromising situation, when he gets confronted, immediately owns it and says, "You are more righteous than I was."
Mhm.
With Tamar, right?
Yeah.
That was with, it's just interesting that they became with child, and both of them were with child in with one encounter.
Right.
That's all a teenager needs.
It's just interesting, like that the timing, because there's timing, not to get.
Well, she had just finished her.
There's timing involved, and it's just interesting that those things happened just in that right time.
You can talk about it, but you can't use the word interesting.
I can't use the word interesting, because I've only said it twice.
You got to use the intriguing word.
So in Nathan's parable, is that what you called it? Parable?
Yes.
Is Bathsheba is the
Little ewe lamb.
ewe lamb.
Yes.
So with that story, it surely makes her sound like she's not the one.
Yeah.
doing this thing.
If there is, if it was in today's society, I don't know what that word is used, but if someone has a cloak of power, of intimidation over someone, come on. He used to be a little shepherd boy, and he couldn't even have an audience with the king until Goliath shows up. You know, he is a pure, devoted, believes in the Lord like no one. He's got faith that moves mountains. In fact, there is another Jewish midrashic story that Uriah actually taught David how to remove the armor off of Goliath so he could chop his head off. I don't know why they gave Uriah such a title or whatever, but anyways, it's in the literature. But so back to your statement, I agree with you. I think she was at some level coerced, but probably if it was consensual, she certainly could have claimed I was coerced by a person of power, even though if it wasn't physical harm or, I mean, that's what happens in the workplace. They just say that's harassment. I was harassed by I don't know the official terms, but I've heard it used.
Basically, whoever has the authority in this situation, whoever has the upper
Yes.
power, that person is always at fault in the culture that we're in.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how the lens that I think people are looking at that.
Yes.
Now. Like, it doesn't matter what she did. He was the king.
Right.
Was she going to tell him no? I don't, could she have said no? I don't know.
Yeah, that's what was implied.
Abigail did.
Who's gonna say that to me?
Abigail did.
Abigail had more guts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She was a strong woman. Well, see, here's another part of the discussion. If Bathsheba is the granddaughter of Ahithophel, she's really young.
She apparently didn't have children, or we don't know.
Apart from Solomon?
But previously with her husband.
No.
So she had to have been.
What if she was a newlywed? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Um,
But so there's two guys who have this name, who she says she's the daughter of somebody, somebody, I forget. And then you read later on that he is the son of Ahithophel. But there are two guys who potentially could be sharing the same name, and she could be from completely a different family. But the names are spelled the same, and that was only one speculation. But to me, I probably think she was young, and the king says this to you, my daughter. This is not unheard of in our terrible world. And if you follow some of the news and conspiracies, it happens way beyond what you think. So.
What about the guys he sent out to get her? Like they knew what was going on.
Oh, yeah.
what is she gonna say?
I don't know. They would have gone to the tabloids
Was
and
Abigail
said,
his wife at the time?
pardon?
Was Abigail his wife at the time?
One of?
So maybe she had a little more, I don't know, she had more position being his wife, and she had a little more leverage or something.
Who had leverage?
Abigail.
Oh,
Over-
this is when they first met, because she was married to a guy
So she
named a
wasn't his wife
Carmelite.
at the time. Okay.
No, she would have been, I mean, his first wife was Micah, and she didn't want to stay with him anymore. That was the daughter of Saul. We'd have to look, I think,
Then Abigail begged for her husband's life.
yes,
Brought him bread, and then
yes,
something happened, and he ended up killing him anyway.
yes.
And then took Abigail.
I mean, there could be a quick search about how many wives did David have.
Too many.
But we know that the line that Mary comes from is produced by a woman whom we haven't mentioned either. So David produces a lot of sons.
So why is the deal with Bathsheba the only thing that gets labeled as that one thing that he did wrong? What
I
about
know.
What about the census?
Very good. I agree with you. I agree with you. I don't think David is a dichotomy, juxtaposition, whatever you want to call it. He has a lot of warts, and he is amplified as being messianic and being the guy who never ever lost a war, never lost a battle. He's typologically the person who Christ is emblematic of, but man, he's got a lot of warts, a lot of bad things. His whole family falls apart. Yeah. You know, one time you see him, hey, I won't cut the robe off of Saul. I won't kill Saul while he's, relieving himself in this cave. I'm going to be, I'll have the moral high ground here, but then he just absolutely loses all the moral anything in other situations. What he did is he wrote a lot of Psalms that, like Psalm 51, is just, that's how you repent. That's how you repent. You own it. You pray that God doesn't take a spirit from you. So, yeah, we like to exemplify his positive exploits and kind of gloss over the other ones. All right.
We don't have
This
to
says
make
only
it a
8.
hero.
Oh, sorry.
Only
8 were named.
8 were named. Thank
Glad
you
he
for
couldn't
looking
keep
at it.
count. He couldn't remember their names.
Well, we certainly, when we get to Mary, we're going to have to be able to trace her lineage down better. And I think that's Luke who does that as opposed to Matthew. All right. Any last insights? If you guys have any insights to share with me.
I think if we're deciding that she is Jewish, I think just recognizing that God's not trying to set up a pattern of, I bring in all the Gentile women. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
there's not necessarily a
certainly Mary isn't
right.
a Gentile. Mary just seems to be a very
I was
loving.
just talking about Bathsheba and Uriah. I mean, not that you're saying that it was the fact, but
Right.
if they would have been newlyweds, wasn't it Jewish law that he would not be able to go to
That's
war?
true too. Yep.
And
Good.
also, after he was killed, if he had a brother, wouldn't his brother
Oh, wow.
had to take her?
Very good.
And just-
That's good. I don't know. These are things you put into the search engine and see what crazy people actually also think that way. No, that's a great question.
Well, and
Where's
I
the
think,
leverite?
like what she was saying, I think it's the Lord opening the womb. Obviously, you wanted, you know what I mean? Like, okay, here's where we're
Open the
going.
womb for a baby that's going to pass
I know,
away.
it's sad.
And David did see it as punishment. He did.
I think just because she became political later does not
Okay.
implicate her in, doesn't imply that she started out manipulating him. or something.
Right. Very
She's just
good.
working the system. Like you said, others. I just get a little, I don't like giving David a pass very much. I
Oh,
get
no.
A little bit. I feel like people read the story of David and say, well, David did this, so I'm doing pretty good, you know.
But I mean,
So
I,
feel better.
you know,
Like,
She just read my thoughts.
but
Look at what these women do.
These women.
I don't like, I think many times in life, I have heard Bathsheba presented in such a way that excuses David.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
and it just, I don't like it.
I
But
don't either.
not that I'm saying that there wasn't more. I'm not trying to say that women are just
Yeah.
innocent of it all either. I just,
You have to read.
he gets to go on and be King David, and she gets to be the person who's always associated with that situation.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you said.
So is that why her name? That's where it
Nobody
comes back
names their
to.
kid, but everybody names their kids David.
Yeah.
Right?
They do still
But-
name their kids.
And
that.
Judah, I was just telling you,
Yes.
but who names their kids, whatever,
Ahithophel,
whatever. But,
Uriah.
Bathsheba?
Bathsheba and Tamar.
Right.
and I think it's.
Well, David has a daughter named
story.
Tamar, and she gets raped by one of his
Yeah.
sons.
Right. Right.
Ugh,
It's a sensitive story
yes,
to present, I think.
I know. Okay,
In the
so
right tone, where it's not
I was
being
reading.
lighthearted about a very heavy thing.
Yes,
And it's not, I don't like just chalking it up to, oh, she was just beautiful and you couldn't resist it. So,
yes.
or men just love beautiful women. So, what was he gonna
She
do?
should have cut the curtain.
Like I'm saying,
It's just a heavy
She
thing.
knew he
I
could
don't-
see from up there.
yeah.
It's like almost like excusing it if you use it because she was so beautiful.
So come down hard on David.
I'm not saying.
You know,
No, it's
I'm
when
not
I
saying
read
come
about
down
David,
hard on him, I'm just saying don't.
say again.
I was just gonna say, when I read about David, I read about in my former life how merciful a God can be.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just like, if he can forgive him, he can forgive me.
right,
You know, and I don't guess I've ever even thought about Bathsheba even doing anything wrong. I just always
I
thought,
don't guess I have either, really.
Yeah.
Really not, well, that's not how it was.
but I mean, I could see where people would.
I read one paper from a Harvard theology professor. He said, "My conversations about David and Bathsheba always generate the most debate in my classes."
Yeah, I'm sure.
Imagine all those college students really debating all these issues, and I thought that was interesting. And then I thought we could do that famous thought experiment, sort of like Family Feud. Just go up to 100 random people and say, finish this phrase. David and
Goliath
Mhm.
and Bathsheba.
which one would win?
Maybe Goliath.
I think
for
so.
the kids-
And that's
The kids. would
that's what we
be-
identify David with, that shepherd boy who has tremendous faith and can face down the demons of hell, whatever. And then the demons catch him in his laziness, which is a message to us all. You can be that guy, but that guy needs Jesus, and we all need Jesus. So I was thinking this culture that's probably not super biblically literate, what they would really say, David and I don't know what's popular in this society with David. But it'd be funny to do that experiment. That might be a fun thing just to do one time. All right. You guys brought up some great stuff and appreciate it. We'll close in prayer. Lord, we know that this incident looms large in the history of David's life. We know, had he been faithful to his calling and had fought the good fight, we would certainly not have to debate these matters. But here's a sinner who's saved by grace, as we all are, who paid in a lot of ways earthly consequences. But we pray that your word would instruct us in what is holy, good, and right, so that there would be the preservation of life, not just for us, but for our families, for our futures, for our nations. Despite what this culture thinks about what's right and wrong, help us to know what is really being preserved for us so that we would act with biblical wisdom and character over these situations, and certainly to show forth the goodness and mercies of Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. I was reading some Jewish material today, and they have this phrase, share of the afterlife. And certain people, they say, this person would have no share of the afterlife. And I don't know, there's sort of always been a debate about the ancient Jewish conception of life after. Daniel speaks about people rising up to shame and glory. But, all right. Bye, everybody.
That, I just was thinking of that song, Hallelujah.